Did you know that if you believe in subjective morality, that means that you support the actions done by Hitler in the Holocaust? I didn't know that either.
Everybody, this is Melanie from The Indefatigable Theist, and today I'm going to be responding to Mr. Repzion, one of his videos that I randomly came across.
Christianity and the Bible and the things would not exist if it wasn't for sin. I think that the most important theological doctrine in Christianity is not the resurrection, rather it is sin.
Alright, so I think it's fine for Mr. Repzion to say that he doesn't believe in sin. Sin is any action that is against God. So if Mr. Repzion doesn't believe in God, it'd be kind of hard for him to believe in any actions that can be done against God. But Mr. Repzion thinks that one of the core and most pivotal beliefs of Christianity is sin. And I think this is kind of a useless statement. I mean, yes, of course, without sin, Christianity couldn't exist. But Christianity couldn't exist without God or humans either. I mean, this is like saying the one thing that Christianity is founded off of is the doctrine of God or the doctrine of humans, because without God, obviously there couldn't be any Christianity, and without humans, obviously no one would have sinned, and Jesus wouldn't have had to come down and die for our sins. But this is just kind of a given. It's not really unique to Christianity, the concept of sin. Other religions have gods or godlike figures, and obviously there are actions that can be done that go against these gods. So this concept isn't at all unique to Christianity.
This is where you are completely wrong, Melanie, and let me tell you why. You're responding to my video I made, The Non-Existence of Sin, where I argue that the most important doctrine in Christianity is sin rather than the resurrection, because without Adam and Eve sinning, there would be no point for the resurrection, there'd be no point for the crucifixion, there would be no point for God sending his son, there would be no point of any of that. Christianity, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that I'm correct on this, Christianity is the only world religion which exclusively deals with the concept of original sin. Now, you being a theist, you know what original sin is, and that is the story of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden. They sin, violate God's word, and he punishes them and all their descendants. Christianity has this unique part of it, and that is the concept of original sin. Now, other religions may incorporate the idea of sin, but as far as I'm aware, no other religions are quite like Christianity in terms of the story of Adam and Eve. But I almost feel as if you're kind of proving my point here, that without original sin, you even admit, without sin, obviously, the resurrection wouldn't exist and other things of the Christian doctrines wouldn't exist. So you're basically confirming what I'm saying, rather you're saying that it's not unique, and I'm arguing that sin is unique because Christianity offers original sin, which is unique to Christianity. Hence, original sin, unique, that's more important than the resurrection, because without it, Christianity wouldn't exist. Or if it did of course, some other religion would take Christianity's place. That's actually an interesting thought. What religion would take Christianity's place if Christianity had never been made? But I have a question for you, Melody, regarding original sin and Adam and Eve in the garden. Since we are talking about Christianity, it seems appropriate that I ask you this question, because I have yet to see any theist or Christian be able to answer this in a way that makes sense, or even give a valid answer to this question I'm about to ask you. So here you have Adam and here you have Eve. They were created without any idea of what is right and what is wrong. That's how the world started, supposedly, according to the Bible. Adam and Eve were created, they had no idea what is right and what is wrong. In fact, the only way to have knowledge of what is right and what is wrong was to eat from the tree of knowledge. But in order to eat from the tree of knowledge, you'd have to disobey a rule that was given to you by someone. But see, here's the problem. You don't know that disobeying rules are wrong because you didn't have any knowledge of what is right and what is wrong upon your very own creation. So in order to have any knowledge of what is right and what is wrong, you have to have already committed a wrong action, but you didn't know that you were committing wrong because you had no knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. I know that sounds confusing, but it does make sense. But what does God do? He punishes Adam and Eve, but not just Adam and Eve, he punishes all of humanity. All descendants of Adam and Eve, he punishes them for eternity. So when we are born naturally a sinner.
What's unique to Christianity is how sin is dealt with, and this is demonstrated through Jesus dying for us. In other religions, you have to do more good things than bad things, like good actions can cover up for bad actions, or you might have God just decide to forgive you or to not forgive you for some particular reason. But in Christianity, the way sin is dealt with is that Jesus came and actually paid a price so that your sins could justifiably be forgiven. And this is really what sets Christianity apart from all other religions, and this is why it's the most pivotal and core doctrine of Christianity. Obviously, it couldn't exist without the concept of sin either, but it's definitely not unique, so I certainly wouldn't call this a core belief.
Melanie, the concept of original sin is a core belief in Christianity. You may not want to acknowledge that because that maybe is what you were taught within your apologetics classes or church. I know that's what I was taught. I was taught strictly that the most important thing in Christianity is the resurrection. But if you look past the resurrection would not be around without the original sin. Which is why I argue that the original sin is the most important thing within Christianity, and I was trying to make Christians think about this, because without it, without Adam and Eve making that non-conscious choice of making a wrong decision against God, which they had no idea which was what was wrong to begin with, resurrection, Jesus, wouldn't be around. There'd be no point for any of it without original sin. If you want to stand out there in the freezing cold and believe that the resurrection is the most important thing, by all means you can believe that. I have no problem. Rather, my video was simply trying to make Christians think outside of the box, and rather that original sin is the core belief of Christianity, not the resurrection, because there's no point to any of that without original sin. That's just how it works. I can't explain it any simpler than that. But the question that got brought up is, Daniel, do you support rape? Do you support murder because you don't believe in sin? The answer is no. Those things are wrong. But I don't need religion to tell me those things are wrong.
So Mr. Repsion believes morality is determined by the beliefs and practices of a society. But I'm not really sure if he truly understands the implications of this, because he then says that he doesn't need religion to tell him rape and murder are wrong. If Mr. Repsion really believes morality is subjective, then he may not need religion to tell him murder and rape are wrong, but he does need his society to tell him so. And something he would have to come to terms with is that according to his worldview, if he was born back in the 1930s and early 40s in Germany, when the Nazis were in power, it would have been immoral for him to not hate Jewish people. If he was born in Afghanistan when the Taliban was in power, he would have had to believe that the thought of a woman being educated or of a person being a non-Muslim is morally reprehensible. If he was in Iran or Iraq or many other Middle Eastern countries in the present day, he'd have to think that it would be immoral for someone to preach a religion or worldview other than Islam, that it would be perfectly fine for a man to have more than one wife, but wrong for a woman to have more than one husband, that it would be immoral for a woman not to wear a hijab, to drive, vote, etc. If Mr. Repsion was born in any of the many communist countries in Asia, he'd have to believe free speech is immoral.
No. Subjective morality is not strictly only determined by societies. I want to make that clear. Now, in my video, I was using an example of, in some cultures and societies, celebrating death is moral. In other cultures and societies, celebrating death is immoral and disrespectful. It's wrong in that culture. Subjective morality is not exclusively only to societies. It is also determined by individuals, in which later in your video you even mentioned this, which actually makes me wonder if you actually don't understand what subjective morality actually means, because you really don't give much of a definition of what subjective morality means, with the exception of saying that it's whatever society says is right and wrong, which is not, if that's all you can understand about subjective morality, that it being strictly what society says, then you have a misinformed, a false idea of what subjective morality entails, because it's a lot bigger than just what society thinks. Just because subjective morality may be determined by a society, that doesn't mean that I will automatically bow down to it or that I have to listen to it. I also never said in my video that society strictly dictates all morality. I never said that any place, although that's the feeling I get, that you're trying to imply that I believe that society dictates all moral choices, and that's obviously not what I believe. Rather, I was just looking at different cultures very vaguely. I vaguely even talked about subjective morality in my video, about what some cultures think are immoral and other cultures think that certain things are moral. But this is what I feel you're trying to communicate to me, and I may be wrong on this, but this is how I understood it from when I'm watching your video. You're trying to say that if morals are subjective, then a murderer killing people, such as Hitler or the Germans slaughtering Jews, that there would be no legal consequence, that there's nothing wrong with that because to them it's a subjective morality in which they deem is acceptable. And you use me, Daniel, as an example of this by saying that if I was in Nazi Germany in the 1940s and I didn't agree with Hitler's ideologies, that it would be immoral for me not to hate the Jews. But what I think you're failing to realize is that subjective does not mean there aren't any. It means that they are subjectively determined by time, place, society, and people. There are still laws put into place by government and societies. But Melody, again, I want to challenge you to look at your own Bible. It commands you to stone disobedient children and people who pick up sticks on Saturday. Do you, Melody, consider either of those two actions moral? Do you do them? I'm going to assume that you don't do neither of those, nor do you believe that they are moral. The Hebrews in the first millennium did, though. They believe that. So my question to you is, why don't you believe these things? Because you've subjectively, along with your society, decided that they're not moral. And I have one more question for you, Melody. If God is moral, answer me this question. According to your mythology in Exodus, God killed all the firstborns in Egypt. That is an astronomical number of civilians to bring about a political change for the Pharaoh. An attack on civilians to bring about a political change is the very act and definition of I would consider terrorism. If your morality is absolute, why is it okay for your God to murder innocents in an act of terrorism? If God doesn't have to obey his very own morality, then by definition, it is subjective.
Now, of course, just because we might have a negative emotional reaction to believing some of these things doesn't automatically mean we shouldn't believe in them. But taking into consideration these facts, I'm curious, Daniel, do you really believe in subjective morality?
A lot of people seem to cling to religion and say that these things are wrong because my religion says so, and that's not the case. There are things that I think are that we know that are bad for society, and we don't do those things because it is bad for society and our culture. For example, if everybody just started lying, if everybody just started killing people, that would be bad for society. Our society would kind of degrade and crumble if we all did things which were bad. But we as a society know that if everybody starts... My right and my wrong for what I deem as right and wrong is based upon what I do and how I affect people. If I do something that which is damaging to someone or can hurt somebody, then I would deem that action to an extent more immoral, and that's wrong because I want to bring happiness, I want to bring peace, I want to bring things that are beneficial to society.
Yeah, this is why I was wondering if he actually understands subjective morality, because what he's talking about here is actually not subjective morality. Not necessarily, anyway. Subjective morality is morality as a particular individual or as a particular society defines it. If a particular individual or society decides they want to do things to benefit and progress society and other people, then that's moral for them. But if a society decides they don't want to do that, then harming other people and harming society is moral.
Absolutely not. If society wants to do something which is going to be destructive towards society and make society a bad place, for example, I used in my earlier video, if everybody in society, let's say in the United States of America, started lying to one another, that would be bad and harmful to society, and it would not bring productive flourishing society, and it wouldn't bring things to help society grow and flourish. It's not bringing peace or happiness or well-being to individuals. Rather, lying is being deceitful and scamming people out of money and things like that. Harming other people or harming society is not moral. There's no justification as to how that could be moral because it's not bringing peace, happiness, or a well-being to an individual. It's not helping society flourish.
If Daniel wants to define morality as benefiting society for himself, that's fine. But if he really believes in subjective morality, then he shouldn't think that someone is immoral for thinking the opposite of what he thinks. Or at least he should recognize that if he were born in a different society that was indifferent to people harming others or even enjoyed it, then taking delight in the suffering of others would be moral.
No, absolutely not. Taking delight in the suffering of other people would not be moral because it's not benefiting or helping society flourish and it's not bringing well-being to other individuals or the society in which you're living. That's why it wouldn't. As for you, as you just said, let me go back. You say, if Daniel wants to define morality as benefiting society for himself, that's fine, but if he really believes in subjective morality, then he shouldn't think someone is immoral for thinking the opposite of what he thinks. I never said this in my video. If someone thinks the opposite of what I think, I never said any place in my video that they are immoral for not thinking the way I do. This is a complete straw man. I don't know where you pulled this out in my video. I never said that. I don't think that at all. It is a big straw man that you've committed here. That I think people are immoral if they don't think the same way I do. No. I would never say something like that, and no place did I say that, imply it, or insinuate it in my video. So this right here is a bad straw man on your part.
And I think we can challenge Mr. Repsion's belief system here. We can ask him what it is about humanity that we should try to benefit other people instead of harm them, or try to avoid harming other people. I mean, we're just one speck out in a vast universe, and a temporary speck at that. It seems inevitable that all of the Earth will end, and all of the humans will be dead, and there won't be anybody around to remember anything that anyone ever did, or to remember what happened. So why is it significant what happens on this temporary dot out in this vast universe anyway? Why should we care? Also, why should we view humanity in a positive light instead of a negative one? I mean, in a way, we're a cancer to the Earth. We're responsible for the litter that we put out and the nuclear waste that's dumped into the atmosphere. We're really causing our universe to die, using up all of its resources. So why should we view humans as a good thing instead of something bad that should just die? I don't think he has any warrant for that on his belief system. What is it about humanity that we should value other people and we should care what happens to other people instead of just what happens to ourselves? I think a lot of atheists like Mr. Repsion just take for granted that human life has value and that we shouldn't try to hurt other humans. But I think a very basic question that never really occurs to any of them is why?
Many atheists will argue that certain actions will harm society and thus we should not do them. But the underlying question is, why should we care whether societies progress or not? On what basis do we hold to the belief that life is valuable?
And this is the big old question. On what basis do we hold the belief that life is valuable? If I could get a coin for every time a Christian or religious person said this towards an atheist skeptic or myself, I'd be filthy rich. There seems to be this idea that life is meaningless without God. A lot of Christians believe this, that an atheist has no value to things, that atheist has no meaning to life, that there is no valuable things in life if you're an atheist or skeptic because you don't believe in God, and God grants value and human worth and gives life meaning. And I completely disagree with that, and I'm going to actually speak on behalf of atheists and skeptics in my answer here, although I'm not an atheist, I'm a deist. But nonetheless, let's answer this question. On what basis do we hold to the belief that life is valuable, and how do atheists find meaning in their life? Why should we not find satisfaction in alleviating pain and suffering in the world? For me, the most important thing in my life is to actively pursue and help and try to reduce suffering, injustice, ignorance, poverty, pain, and disease among people. It's looking out for the well-being of other people, helping people. To describe these acts of trying to alleviate suffering and help people in poverty, to say that these acts are simply meaningless, that's hardly a moral stance. And I've had Christians and religious folks tell me that my desires to make a difference in this world are meaningless because I don't believe in a theistic God of the Bible. that it makes all of my decisions and choices to impact and influence people, it makes everything meaningless. It's meaningless. There's no value to my life. There's no value to other people because there is no God. I've been told by many religious people that there's no reason to do good to others. There's no reason to care about other people if there is no God. But what you have to understand is that this is strictly a religious claim that originated on the concept of original sin, which is what I stressed earlier in this video. The original sin concept is arising from the theological doctrine that we are all inherently wrong, sinful human people. That when we were born, we were naturally corrupted because of what Adam and Eve did eating out of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We cannot be good people. We cannot be moral people who make choices and make a difference in people's lives because we don't believe and we don't have Jesus in our life. But if you're religious and you're watching this video, or you believe in the Christian God, whatever, I want you to take away this one thing in my video. Life cannot be meaningless, so as long as we have the capacity to look for the well-being of ourselves and other individuals. For true, utter meaninglessness, we need heaven. Yes, we need heaven to have a true, meaningless, completely worthless, invaluable life. Because heaven is defined as a place of perfect bliss. There's no pain, there's no outcry, there's no anything really. It's a permanent state of perfection. So the whole concept of making a difference is completely ruled out because of heaven. If the difference made an improvement, the previous state could not have been perfect. If it made things worse, the result would not be perfect. In heaven, neither of these two things are possible. And that's what's sad. Heaven, by definition, is a state which cannot be improved on. So when you die and you go up to heaven to meet your loved ones, who, assuming they didn't go to hell, there is no joy, and you can't have mutually, you can't have, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Your joy cannot be improved, is what I'm trying to say, in heaven, because it's a permanent state of perfection. So meeting your loved one really means absolutely nothing because you're not going to be able to be any more happier, whereas if they weren't there. Consider this though. Consider the pointlessness of heaven. The idea of heaven is completely foolish. At least in reality, we can see a difference in people's lives that we affect them and influence them. If you have ever claimed that your life would be absolutely meaningless without your faith in God, do you really believe that your family, friends, and coworkers absolutely have no worth of their own? If you really believe that life is completely meaningless without God, then it is you, not atheists, not skeptics, who debase humanity. It is Christianity, not atheism, that diminishes real value and the real meaning of life. To me, it is completely warped and twisted for religious people to believe that without the belief in a God, life is meaningless. Human beings deserve compassion and concern simply because they share our common capacity for alleviating pain, suffering, injustice, ignorance, trying to improve in the well-being of other people and bring happiness and peace. For me personally, I think it is theistic religion which makes life to have absolutely no value or meaning. Yes, theistic religion. And I say this because theistic religion says that the only purpose and meaning to life can be found in the existence and relationship with God. It completely dismisses all actions by skeptics or atheists reaching out to other people and helping them and trying to alleviate suffering and injustice and pain and poverty. It completely ignores all of that. Rather, God is the purpose and meaning of life, nothing else. I think it's time that we as a community here on YouTube, including non-religious people, atheists, skeptics, deists, whatever, try to abandon this worldview that Christianity has, rather than a twisted concept that we have to believe in God in order to have a purpose and meaning in life. I hope I speak for a large majority of my audience watching this video on the definition, on what basis do we hold to the belief that life is valuable, because I think I gave a very sufficient answer to that question. I don't need religion or God or a belief in the existence of God in order to have the belief that life is valuable. I just hope that some of the religious people watching this video can realize the same thing.